Morning, students. Today you're going to be learning about a plot diagram and what does the plot include in a story. And so first thing, we want to make sure that we understand the expectations for all of our videos. And the first thing is that you only want to have the video and Schoology open. And then secondly, that you want to make sure you take your time to complete this assignment or task, meaning that you can pause, rewind, and fast forward as needed throughout this video. And lastly, today, when you see anything written in red that is underlined, that is what you'll be writing down in the blanks on your guided notes. Today, make sure that you have with you your plot notes to take, and here is a visual of what that looks like. You can find those in the folder over in the materials section in class, or you can find them in Schoology under the assignments section. You also need to make sure you have a writing utensil unless you are doing them on Schoology, and lastly, you do need to make sure that you have headphones so that not everybody is listening to where you are at in the video, because everybody will be at a different position. And here we go. So again, you're going to be identifying the elements of a plot diagram, and that is your goal for today. And so first thing, a plot, the definition. I asked you guys a couple of days ago, what is a plot? And a lot of you said the main idea of a story. And unfortunately, that is more of a theme. And so we will be talking about a theme, and it is sometimes mixed up with what the plot is, but a plot is specifically the organized pattern or a sequence. So here, these are written in red, pattern and sequence. So those would be your blanks to fill in on your guided notes of events that make up a story. And every plot is made up of a series of events that are related or connected to one another. Okay, so everything connects together and will make sense at the very end of the story. So kind of like a puzzle, and at the very end, you're like, oh, I see the whole picture. All right, and in a plot diagram, this may look familiar to you. It's kind of like the mountain. As we go up the mountain, we have 5 different positions that we will go over. And as you continue in your guided notes, you're going to have these numbers that are on your guided notes, and you're going to want to go ahead and fill those different positions in. So the first one is called exposition. Okay, your exposition, I think of expo or experience, and that's kind of what helps me remember. It's the beginning, right? So it's the beginning of the short story or the beginning of the story in general. This is where we are introduced to our characters, typically our main character, where we learn the setting of the story, so where it's taking place, and that can include also the time period, if it's a historical event, or also setting can be, just what is happening around the character. And then most importantly, we're introduced to the main conflict or the main problem. And this is something that the main character will have to face as they go throughout the story. So, and that is going to be your number 1. So at the very bottom, as our person starts walking, that is the exposition. Exposition is the number 1 part, which tells us the beginning of the story. So it gives us kind of the background and the base so that we know what's happening, where we're starting, and who's involved. Number 2 is our rising action. So as we kind of go up, we're kind of getting more information about the character and maybe getting some information about other characters, which we would call minor characters or supporting characters. And we're also being provided, the story begins to develop conflict or conflicts. Sometimes there's more than one, but there's always one main conflict that the character has to deal with. So remember, it's written here in red, so that is going to be one of your blanks. And again, number 2 is your rising action, so which makes sense because we're going up our mountain. And secondly, it is a building of the interest or the suspense that occurs. So it's kind of like, oh, well, what's going to happen? How are we going to get to, how is this character going to get through this problem that they're facing? Number 3 is the climax, and this is the very tip, very top of the mountain. And so this is kind of the turning point of the story. This is when, you know, the character kind of meets a fork in the road, and they have to they face the conflict, and whatever decision they make is either going to make the story go one direction or the other. And that's the point where you're like, oh my gosh, I hope the character does this. And you know, it's at that point where an author can kind of surprise the reader and make the character do something unexpected, and then it turns the story into a different direction than what we were anticipating, which is why the climax is a very important part. And so it's our turning point. And this is when we have to face the conflict. And sometimes, like I said, the main character will change in some way. And this can be a good or a bad change. So not necessarily always a negative, but could be a positive too. All right, and so then next, as we go down, we're now doing our falling action. So step 4 is our falling action, meaning we're going to start to tie up the loose ends of the plot. So we're not going to introduce anything new to our story, because we're trying to wrap everything up. And so our conflict and the climax are now taken care of, and like our problem is being solved. We're coming to the end of this, so we need to kind of make sure everything, all the little stories are being told and finished, so that the reader is not left wondering, like what else, like where's the answer to this question? So this is when all the answers come to light. And lastly, you have your resolution. So your very last piece, I think of resolution, right? So the end, is your step 5 and your resolution. And this is when the story comes to a sensible ending, meaning whatever it was that has been going on throughout the story, the end makes sense. It's not this twisted turn of events all of a sudden at the very end, and you're like, what? Where did that come from? So it makes sense to you as the reader, and you are satisfied with the ending. Now, you may not like the ending, but as a reader, you are satisfied with the fact that the story has come to an end, and you weren't left hanging with unanswered information. Okay, so those are your 5 steps. So what you're going to do here is putting it all together. These are going to correlate. Numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are literally the blanks that I had you already answer. So step 1 would be your exposition. Step 2 would be your rising action. And those come at the beginning of your story. Okay, whoops. Let me go back. Step 3 is your climax, and that's your middle of the story. And then step 4 and 5, 4 is your falling action, and 5 is your resolution. And those are what make up the end of story. So I wanted to give you this visual so you could see when you think of the beginning, the middle, and the end, where do those 5 pieces fall? Okay, and so that is going to help you with your mastery check today. So now you are ready to go forward with the assignment and your mastery check. And that is all.